One early afternoon, Emerald was at home and she was quite bored. She didn't know what to ease her boredom. But then she came up with one idea. Since it has been a while since she practiced with her revolvers, and she thought maybe some practice could be good for her for once. So she took her weapons, left her place, and went to a small place where she usually go for some practicing. When she arrived at this place, there was no other people around, and she thought maybe now there was just at least her there, she would be at least given some privacy and at least some more relaxing. During the next 2 to 3 hours, she practiced a lot with her firearm, and for some reason she felt more relaxed and even more calm because this actually was the one thing that she wanted to do. She wanted to keep up her practice and her skills with using her revolvers like that. But during her training, something stopped her tracks. But then, a loud sound happened and a flash of light appeared, but even for just a few seconds. That was long enough for her to be blinded for only a few seconds. She was taken aback when she heard this sound. She couldn't understand what it was causing it. But as she was very brave herself, she decided to look up what is causing this problem, or this the sound and the light. She went in the direction where it came from, even though that she wasn't sure, but she was holding her revolvers up high all the time, just prepared if it was maybe a potentially a grim. But as she was walking around to the place, she saw this small clearing, and on the ground it is red creature lying on its back, and she had no idea what it was because Emerald has never seen anything like it. To her, it could have been just a simple animal. But the thing is, this particular animal had shoes, and she thought maybe this could have been a person, but just more using as some sort of disguise. But in the end, why would someone dress like this? So she immediately rolled out, this could not be a person that she thought in a dress or something or disguise. As she was just standing there, holding her weapons, pointing at this creature, it suddenly opened its eyes slowly, and she was prepared for shooting it if they would attack her, because she thought maybe this could have been a new form of Grim, an evil darkness spirit. But it didn't. It just looked at her as it sat up and eventually stood up. She was holding the weapon at this creature, and he only said, "Where am I? Who are you?" He was as least puzzled as Emerald were. She had no idea this creature could actually speak. She was really surprised. But as she was just standing there, just pointing her weapons at him. But for some reason, he didn't even attack her or even looked a threat. So she lowered her weapons and said her name was Emerald, and asked for his name. And his name was Knuckles the Echidna. She had never heard of the species called Echidna before. She said that, and he asked her where he is. She told him that, and he didn't. He said that he never heard of that place, and he asked where of Mobius he is. She looked a bit surprised and asked, "Mobius? This world is named Remnant," she said. She looked at him more surprised, and Knuckles, for some reason, couldn't understand it. But he then tried to ask her more questions. But then she just put her revolvers aside and asked if it's possible that he could go with her to another place since it started to rain and she didn't want to get wet of it. So he agreed. At her place, she made some food and some drinks for him while they talked. Knuckles got to know more about this strange world called Remnant, and as he was telling her about Mobius, she was actually a bit surprised. She did mention that she used to be a thief. That word triggers Knuckles a little bit and said that he didn't like thieves as much. Because he mentioned that someone back in his world tried to take something that belonged to him, or that had belonged to his clan for centuries. And she asked what it was, and he said, an emerald, a giant emerald. She literally smiled and said, well, isn't that a coincidence? And he's like, what do you mean? He said, almost a little angry. I mean, you guarded something, a big emerald. My name is Emerald. I mean, what is the coincidence that you actually were into someone by the same name? That actually made him a little bit surprised, and he realized that the point, and was like, yeah, I have no way expected that. And they started to actually relax a bit and talk some more. And Knuckles will then ask what he was going to do now, since they probably didn't know how to get back to his own world, since he didn't have any such magical abilities apparently. And well, he said to himself, maybe just stay here for a bit and before to move on to some other place. He didn't want to cause any problems for other people in the area, and since he had spent most of his childhood mostly alone, except for when he was have a mentor to train him to be a guardian, but at that he spent most of his childhood alone. So maybe just to find an insulated place where he could remain, so only most of it spent alone. But Emerald told him that she cannot even imagine this, like to being growing up and spend of his almost entire youth to be just a complete alone. He told her that it had its moments. It had times that he did wish that he had someone to talk to. But since he took his guardianship very much quite serious, but now he didn't have the emerald that he would, so as he called Master Emerald, he didn't know what to do. But then she also had asked him how he even ended up in her world if he didn't have any magical powers. He explained that he was along with a few other friends attacking a big enemy of theirs who had collected 7 other emeralds, smaller ones in different colors, who possessed a strong magic in them. And he had used them for a machine, and during the attack they became unstable, and somehow he teleported to this world. He was expecting maybe one of his friends could have ended up in this place. She then asked him if this supposed emeralds could have been end up in this world as well. He thought that for a moment and said it's a possibility, but if they did, they'd probably scattered around the world by now. She asked why would they be scattered, not in the same place. He told them that this is actually something that happened. Every time when those emeralds had been found and used, after they've been used, they will scatter around the world and need to be found again. But then he also said that they don't end up in the same place over and over when they're scattered. There will be always new places. So it's always impossible to tell where to find these emeralds. And since Knuckles didn't have any other world, no other place to go, Emerald decided to let him stay for a while, at least to get to know. And during this short time, he actually also learned more about her world, the world history and something like that from books she had. He learned more about the so-called Grims, and that she thought maybe that he could have been a Grim, maybe a new type, but after they got to know him better, he wasn't. But during this time, Emerald actually has started to feel attracted to Knuckles. She couldn't explain exactly why, because it felt he was honest, a strong, loyal person. Especially that he was a guardian, that he took his role quite serious. But without this so-called Master Emerald, Knuckles he didn't seem to have any purpose anymore. Without the emerald, without his role as a guardian, he didn't know what to do. But he did mention that he used also to be a treasure hunter, while also that somehow sparked an interest. So Emerald actually asked him if he wanted to maybe just travel with her to go to find some treasures maybe they could sell for some profit. He actually was a little bit hesitating, but said yes, after all. So after that, they traveled around in the kingdom to find some long forgotten treasures, artifacts. They find some artifacts which they sold either to museums or markets. But at this point, Knuckles had become very much public knowledge already. At first, of course, when every time when he went to a new town, either if he arrived alone, people would assume that he was a Grim. But when he arrived with Emerald, nothing was like that. But it was just something that Knuckles at first has always assumed that he was a Grim. But eventually, both him and Emerald decide to arrive at a new place together all the time, so that he won't be much accused being thought or being accused as a Grim, just in case. But during this particular time though, Emerald's affection towards Knuckles had only grown stronger and stronger. And even Knuckles actually had started to feel more attracted to Emerald. At first, he didn't know exactly if it was just romantic attraction or more as friendly attraction. He felt more attracted to her as a friend first because she was the only one, the first one in this world that showed him kindness. And he even had impressed her with his immense strength when he smashed rocks with just bare hands. She never imagined anyone or like him be able to smash a boulder just with his bare hands. And that's one of the few things that actually attracted him to her. But after they had traveled around in the kingdom and found a lot of long forgotten treasures or artifacts, they decided just simply to return back home to her place and rest for a while before next missions or next travels or journeys, as they call it. But when they came back home, their feelings for each other had only grown stronger. And just prior to their arrival home, Knuckles confessed his feelings for Emerald, and she did the same. And during this time of their journey back home, they actually encounter a few Grims, which they literally defeated easily together. And after they had came back home, Knuckles and Emerald had made their status of as a relationship official. It didn't take long for the public to realize it, but as long as they were happy, they didn't even care if the other people didn't accept or even approve their relationship. But at first, people didn't want to be around them. But after they saw how much Knuckles were helpful around in the community, and how he treated Emerald, a former thief, they actually had a different view, a different opinions about Knuckles. And eventually people started to talk to him a bit more, and eventually he became a bit of friends of some of the other locals. He even told them some of his journey with Emerald around to find some treasures and what kind of danger they were in and how they fought off some Grims together. They were all good stories, even though these stories couldn't end up being tired of listening to. But just after being dating for about 3 years, Knuckles and Emerald wanted to get married at one point, but they weren't sure if they would be able to do so. But Knuckles actually asked one of the locals if it was possible, and they said yes. So he proposed to Emerald on their third anniversary together. She said yes immediately. They decided to have just a small wedding with some friends at witness. They didn't want to have a big wedding since it probably would have been too costly and they didn't want to spend so much. But afterwards, it was just a great time. They even went to the coast for as a honeymoon for about a week. And after they came back, though, Knuckles and Emerald still continue to travel around in the kingdom for locate some long forgotten treasures and artifacts they would sell to private collectors or even get in museums for as profit. This work gave them a small fortune. They managed to buy a little bit bigger house for themselves, but after being married for about 2 years, Knuckles and Emerald wanted to start a family. But unfortunately, they couldn't have any children of their own. But Emerald suggests that they go to an orphanage, adopt. And Knuckles thought it was actually a good idea. And so they went to this local orphanage, and they adopted two girls, one named Jade and one named Molly. Jade and Molly were sisters. Jade was the older one, Molly was the younger one. And Knuckles felt happy for once that now he was a father figure. But even the first times, only for the first few months of being as a new father, both Jade and Molly were a little bit afraid of Knuckles. Not only that because he was not a human, because he was a different creature, but when they saw him, how strong he were, and how much the stories he told them, they eventually opened up and accepted him as a father. But Emerald, on the hand, was more accepted. After all, she was human like themselves. She was just happy to have two daughters of her own, even if they were not blood related. But Knuckles, he knows that his own parents, if they somehow could see him right now, they would be happy and proud to see their son being married, have a family of their own. But even from time to time, ever since he even got married and have a family of his own, it happens sometimes that he could just sit there in an empty room thinking about his old adventures. But another thing that he really missed it most was his duty as a guardian to watch over Master Emerald. He doesn't even know if anyone else back home took over that role as a new guardian. Since he was the last of his kind, he didn't know what else, but he knows very deep in his heart that his old friends would make sure that the Master Emerald is protected no matter what. But now he has a new role, a new duty. Not only protect Emerald, his beloved wife, but also protect his daughters Jade and Molly. Molly and Jade, on the other hand, they wanted to be a huntress themselves after they heard stories about them. So eventually when they were old enough, Jade and Molly went to this academy where they would become a huntress. And eventually they did. Jade would eventually even end up marrying a man and have two daughters of her own. Molly, the same thing. She actually ended up marrying a man and they have two daughters and one son together. For Emerald, she was really happy that she actually ran into Knuckles that day, those years ago. In fact, she was just happy that she and Knuckles became partners in traveling around to find these long forgotten artifacts to sell or just give it away. But even though that now that Knuckles and Emerald had retired from that missions these days, but instead they decided to just simply to stay in town to raise their daughters and be a family. Even Emerald, her love for Knuckles was true and pure. She was just happy that she had actually had encountered Knuckles all those years ago. And this is how Emerald and Knuckles, from their true love, got a family together. The end.